In today's video, I'm interviewing Miss Barbara Beeman. This is a wonderful woman that I've known for a few years. I met her through a mom's program called Moms to Moms. Miss Barbara has been a mentor mom with this program and has been a wonderful mentor in my life. Not only that, I noticed that Miss Barbara was involved in some of the more historically minded organizations in the community. She proved to be very knowledgeable about some things in history. And so I wanted to sit down with her, talk to her about the women's suffrage movement, the things that she's been involved in the community, and get her take on a couple of the issues that I address in Among the Pages. So I wanted us to chat a little bit about the celebration that will be in Nashville in our future, but in my readers' present. What is planned for that celebration?
Well, I don't know all of it. I do know they're supposed to have a skydivers.
Ooh.
I just found that out today from one of my friends who is an organizer, and they'll be talking about the statue. And I have been every year since they installed the statue. It's been an exciting thing. And to see the women from across the state and their stories and what people are still doing. One of my friends and I have talked about crashing the party. You know, if it's going to be at the park, it's a pretty big park and you can kind of be on the fringes. And, you know, I'm thankful they can do so much, but by having it virtual, you know, women all over the state, all over the country can be a part of it. So that part is good. But you know, there are exhibits at the park. It's in the Parthenon. There are exhibits at the state library. Those would be really good too.
Yeah, excellent. And I know, I read at least that the letter that Harry Byrne, his mom wrote, is in Knoxville at one of their archives, and that's one of the things I want to see when I go, is to see the letter.
Well, my younger brother actually lives in the county that he was from, and we tried to find his home, which is not open to the public. We tried to find it, but obviously I did not have good enough directions on the day that I was there. So I'll be back sometime. We'll try to find out where.
Yeah. One thing I would like to ask is what all of this women's suffrage, the fight, all of it, what it means to you.
You know, it opens up opportunities, I think, and we have, I like, well, you know, the statement that the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world, but we have a lot of influence. The issues that are facing our country today are not so much economic issues, but they're heart issues. And I think women are much more attentive to heart issues. Healthcare is a big issue, and you're aware of that. You know, there's so many things in education. We've talked about that. You know, right now we're concerned about our children going to school, but those things that I think that we are most adept at are the issues that are facing our country, and we have to be informed, prepared, and participate in the process, not just in, you know, being knowledgeable, but participate in the process. And our right to vote is crucial to that. The statute in Clarksville says Tennessee's triumph is a ballot box. We have that opportunity, that right to vote and make a difference, and it's our job to do so. I think it's a Christian responsibility too. I know some people don't feel that way, but we're told to respect our government, to submit to authority. And how can you participate in something if you're ignorant about it?
I agree. And as you talk about the Christian involvement and the Christian responsibility to stand up, one of the things that I did find as I delved into this suffrage movement, and so I tackle it in the book, is how the church was divided on this issue. It wasn't just like the church took a stand against or for. There were churches on both sides of the issue. What are your thoughts on that?
And one interesting thing, you know, that the first women who got this going were Quakers, and the Quakers have a different attitude toward women, but they were already organized for the abolitionists. They were abolitionists, and so they had a network, an organization. And in Clarksville, where we are today, it's very interesting. Something we've uncovered with the local suffragists is that many of them attended Madison Street Methodist Church, and that also is a religious group that values the service of women. But I think every single church, I don't care what your perspectives are, is dependent upon the leadership of women. Every single one of them, whether they're women in their hierarchy or not, we each have a role to play. And we read in Scripture about who are you to judge somebody else's servant. I mean, that's not our job, but we're all called to serve. And part of serving sometimes, well, actually, I'm not going to go into a lot of this, but the Lord called me into politics and I just didn't believe it. And he sent somebody to confirm it. And I thought, because he called me, boy, I'm going to win. Wrong. I still don't know. But he told me what my reward would be for my obedience. And there's a history of dementia in my family. And he promised me that I get to keep my mind. You might wonder about that sometime. But then he told my sister-in-law this, and she told my brother, oh, Bob, the Lord's going to let Barbara keep her mind. This is something in our family, you know? So do you think that the Lord can use anybody anywhere, and we must be open to his call, whatever it is?
Really, the thing that kind of sparked this particular book was my own experience while I was in college. So they had a seminar series where they brought in just different interesting people to talk. One of the more notable ones I remember was a man that had been at the massacre at Tiananmen Square. And I thought it was just so moving what he talked about. But one of the people that one of the individuals that came was a woman from the national organization. You know that.
Right.
But I thought some of the things that she said were very interesting, and I have a way of just sitting back and observing things. That's probably one of the writer things, you just observe human nature and see what you can learn about people, and just observing kind of in research where the feminist movement began and where it is now. And a lot of what my journey was is kind of played out in the main character a little bit. But I wanted to ask what kind of your thoughts are on the women's suffrage movement, kind of where a lot of people would ping the beginning of the feminist movement and where it is today.
One of the things you mentioned, it stirs up. I'm a great fan of the Daily Bible in chronological order. Now, there are many Bibles in chronological order, but this is my favorite. I've seen several. And the first time I read that through, I said, it's all about love. I mean, this is what Jesus said it was that way in the beginning. So, and the second time I read it through, it's all about choice. There's nothing in this world if you choose not to serve Jesus. He wants you to choose to serve him. It is your choice. There's nothing going to happen to you in this life necessarily if you don't choose to follow him. He wants you to choose. And realizing that we have a choice, everything we do, it's how we serve him. And I think the word choice has been given a dirty word, but he's called each one of us into his service. Our choice is to answer yes or no, whether we agree or not.
Right.
But, and it's part of this, I mentioned earlier about judging somebody else's servant. That is not my job. My job is to do what he told me to do. And to be available when he calls. And it's not always convenient. And it's not always something that I've thought about. There are instances where women have been overlooked, where they have been persecuted, but they don't talk about her mind or her abilities. They talk about other things.
Right.
Snide remarks. And try to put them down. We were made because there was a need for us.
Yeah.
And so each one of us has a different need to fill. Part of that, it's just like the suffrage movement was that, women could not even, if their husbands divorced them or they divorced, the husband got the children, regardless. Could have been horrible. She had no problem. And it's been in your lifetime, Sarah, that women could have their own credit card.
Really?
But I remember getting a credit card in my name just so I would have credit. My name wasn't on anything. I didn't have any property. In fact, one time we had a guy rebuild a car, and I went to get the title for it, the license plate, and I got, oh rats, I'm going to have to go all the way back home to get his information. But he had put it in my name, and I didn't know it. So it was my car. It really was, and with my name on it, so I already had everything. And so that probably doesn't mean much to you because it's normal. But, there's so many things that women didn't have access to. These first women, they didn't have access to education.
Right.
When I was a freshman in college, I became engaged. And at Christmas, and my older brother says, well, you might as well quit school. You're not going to. I said, I'm I'm not going to quit school. I mean, I was offended. And he said, well, you're never going to have to work. I said, I'm going to school. It's interesting. My mother was expected to go to college. My mother, who was born in 1910. But my first husband's mother was not expected even to go to high school.
Mm.
And in fact, that was not available to her.
Mm.
Maybe the 8th grade was as far as she could go in school because they didn't live in town.
Mm.
And so education is very important. You realize that, was it Harvard that was founded? Part of the interest in public education in our country was to teach people to read so they could read the scripture.
Mm.
Well, anyway, I don't know if I've made my point or not.
Yeah,
But
I hear you. And some of the things that really bother me about things that just exist in our culture and in our law and our legal and medical systems that shouldn't be in place, in my opinion. Like I have a friend that wants to get, her tubes tied. She can't do that without her ex-husband's permission.
yes,
And
she has no control over her body.
that doesn't seem right to me.
Oh, there's so many things. And, the reason women were dying, heart disease, number one killer of women, more than breast cancer or anything else, heart disease. And do you know why? They didn't do any studies on women's hearts because we have hormones, so there were no studies to tell. We don't have the same symptoms. Our symptoms are different. So there's so many things where this just didn't seem to be important to include us. Now, it's interesting, one of the earlier leaders of the suffrage movement, Susan B. Anthony, she was a Quaker, and she wouldn't marry because she did not want to have to share. She did not want to become subservient, basically, is what it was. And so Katie Stanton, who had 6 kids, she wrote Susan B. Anthony's speeches because Susan had she could run around anywhere because she had that freedom. But but that was one of the reasons she wouldn't marry, because she did not want to give up all her freedom.
One of the topics that is challenging in our current society, especially among Christian women, is the whole idea of submission. I hope that's not a dirty word for the ladies that are listening, but I really, really like your wisdom in this particular area. Can you share your thoughts?
We are called to submit to God. Everyone is called to submit to God. And our submission is our choice. This is an interesting thing. My first husband, when he was dying, he said something about I had to submit to him. I said, no, I don't. And he looked at me. I said, I choose to submit to you. It's like, wow, I've missed out on all this 50 years. And that's the thing. Our submission is a choice. It's just like our desire to love. It's part of the package. We are to submit. Scripture tells us to submit to government. Now, does that mean that you have to approve of everything they do? No, but you still got to pay your taxes. There are ways to protest that. Submission is always a choice. And sometimes you might feel that you're asked to do something that is harmful. If it's something harmful, don't do it. That is God's call for all of us to submit. And we're to submit to his authority. And if something doesn't jive with God's authority, I don't see how you can submit to it. Now, sometimes you might disagree with something and you have to bide your time, but we are called to submission, not to just anybody. I know a woman who's had to leave her husband because he was abusive to her. Is she supposed to submit to him? I don't think so. We're supposed to sit to the Lord. That's where our submission belongs. And if it's a marriage, a husband is supposed to submit to the Lord. He's supposed to love his wife as Christ loved the church, gave himself for it. If he has given himself for the Lord, there cannot be any problems.
I like that. I like that a lot. One of the things I also really, really like is this more modern take that more and more people are adapting, especially in the church. I hear this more and more often, that men and women are not the same. We're different, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have equal opportunity. The difference between we're not the same, but that doesn't mean we can't have equal opportunity.
It doesn't mean that we're not, like I said earlier, most churches would fold if it weren't for the women leadership. That's a general statement we can make. I mean, and everybody is going to put its own limits in, but our submission is to the Lord.
I definitely agree, and I I really do. I really do like that perspective. And I think it gets lost a lot in the way some churches may teach submission and some marriage counselors teach submission. But I
Mhm.
really like that perspective.
You know, sometimes when you hear of a movement or something, it sounds gross,
Mm.
or you can't identify with a person, but you don't know what they have been through. Every person is answerable for themselves.
One of the more, the word that's come into me is empowering. As a woman, things that I came across in scripture was in Genesis when God created Eve. Well, first of all, he created woman in his image, just as he did Adam.
Hmm.
But when he created Eve, he said that she would be Adam's Ezer Kenegdo. And I know, like, when my mom was my age, that word only meant helpmeet. The wife was the helper. As more people are delving into that word, they're finding that that word is probably better translated as sustainer beside. Like a warrior, it's usually used to refer to God actually in scripture as, and every time it refers to God, he's defending and protecting and being a warrior for Israel. So looking at it from that perspective, that yes, I do stand beside my husband and I submit, but I'm not only helping him, I am sustaining him, and I'm a warrior in his beside him in that way, praying for him, praying over him, and fighting alongside him.
It's a partnership.
Mm-hmm.
It's really what it is. And I'm going to have to share with you a quote from Sojourner Truth.
Okay.
Uh, she talked about her background. Of course, she was a slave, earned her
Mm-hmm.
own freedom, and she said that people say that men are supposed to help women over mud puddles and into carriages. She said, nobody ever helped me. And they said, and Christ wasn't a man. And she said, and where did your God come from? From God and a woman. Weren't no man involved.
mm.
Perspective has a lot to do with things and where we are, and the way we think in our country. It's
Mm-hmm.
different way people in other countries think.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
I mean, the process is the same, but we have so many different factors
Mm-hmm.
involved, and there, but for the grace of God, go I.
I really find myself saying that quite a bit, and I like that because it keeps me humble and realizing that it's true, that God has preserved and sustained and maintained in a lot of ways. Yeah, it's been interesting for me the last couple of days to talk to Audrey about suffrage a little bit, as much as, she can handle of that, and, just make her aware of the fact that women haven't always been able to vote,
Mhm.
and that Tuesday is the 100th anniversary of that, and that Tennessee was important in that. And
Mhm.
she got really excited. She's like, well, can I vote? And I'm like, well, not yet, but not because you're a woman, not because you're a girl, but because you're not old enough.
Yeah.
How was it yesterday?
Oh, it worked out. It was beautiful. Lots of people there, and um, Paula Casey from Memphis was our speaker. She is so
Mm,
wonderful, and she is such a history
mm.
buff about the whole thing. She used to be in Clarksville with the Leaf Chronicle many years ago,
Oh.
and but for instance, one of the black sororities was there, and of course she thanked them publicly. She recognized them for
Mm,
what they had done in the movement and everything, and so she was just really awesome just to
mm,
have her. But when I found out she was going to speak, it was wonderful because I've heard her many times and had her at an event
mm,
back in January that I was in charge of. And these men that were involved in the movement, the one that helped organize Tennessee did it at the behest of the government. I mean, not Tennessee, but to help organize the fight to get ratification. And then there was a guy that he from an immigrant background, and
mm.
so the book was written about him. But why can't Mama vote? So and that was just published maybe in January. Today's paper has a lot of really good stuff, and I was looking at some of that. And so now then it's all jumbled up, and I don't know what's coming out right.
It's
I
okay.
mean, oh, that's so exciting, and
Mm-hmm.
So I
Yeah.
don't remember the specifics.
I do remember reading that in one of the interviews with Harry Byrne, that was one of the things that struck him is that, his mom was a widow and she was running the farm and she was well read and she was intelligent, went to school, and I think even went to college. And so she couldn't vote, but the illiterate tenant farmers that were working her farm, and he always thought that was a little bit strange.
Lots of stories like that. Favorite one, I'm just going to tell you this. This is nothing. There's a woman who lives on the plateau, and she does a storytelling of her her grandmother,
Mm.
who was in a little town. I don't remember which town, but anyway, it's in more of the mountain area. And she worked for the mayor, and she was going to vote in 1920. He fired her, and she says, "I'm going to put a pox on your cows." She got up super early every morning and went to milk his cows before he did. And she milked her cows. So he would go out to milk the cows, and there was no milk because she'd already done it.
Right.
And then she made it into butter and sold it to him. And I think she was just maybe doing his laundry or something. After a while, he asked her to take the pox off of his cows, but he didn't want her to vote. There was a lot of opposition to women. And I remember a meeting at church. They were having a business meeting, and my 12-year-old son, who knew nothing, could go to that meeting, but I couldn't. If you're going to have a meeting of the church, be a meeting of the church. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks for tuning in for the rest of my interview with Barbara Beeman. Please do subscribe and ring the bell. I'll see you next time.